Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. In the previous lesson we learned how to build forms using Angular's template-driven forms. Now we are going to transition to reactive forms. Reactive forms give us more flexibility and control over form validation and state management by letting us define the form structure directly in our component class. Reactive forms use explicit form models created in the component, unlike template-driven forms where Angular creates the form model automatically. They are a great choice for more complex or dynamic forms. And honestly, I prefer working more with reactive forms over template-driven forms. So let's get over to Visual Studio Code and start coding. First thing we need to do is go to app module and let's import reactive forms module from Angular Forms and also add them in our imports. Now we can go back to our task list TS file and start doing the logic. Let's take the task manager form we built in the previous lesson and convert it into a reactive form. Now first let's define a new variable called task form of type FormGroup. The type FormGroup is basically provided by the reactive form, so we can import it. We will add a constructor here and use it to create and initialize our task form. And let me talk about the constructor a little bit. So in Angular and JavaScript, TypeScript in general, the constructor is a special method that is called when instance of a class is created. It is primarily used to initialize class members like properties and methods, set up dependencies, or perform setup tasks when the class is initiated. In Angular, the constructor is often used for injecting dependencies like services or other objects that the component or service needs. Key points to remember about the constructor is we can use it for initialization, dependency injection, and automatic execution. We will see it in action in the next lessons, as well as some basic Angular lifecycle hooks like ng-on-init and ng-on-destroy. Now let's get back to our code and use the constructor for our task form. First we will set the task form to a new form group object and define our input, which is the task name, and set it up as an new form control and empty string. Also notice at the top how we import the required things like form control. Now let's add the reactive form validators and add the required as well as the minimum length validator. It might look confusing, but imagine this form control as an HTML input like we did in the template. Instead of adding these validators or input value in the HTML, we are doing it from the logic. We will use the task name field to bind with the input in the HTML, and you will see how everything comes together. Now let's move to the add task method. First we need to remove the parameter from our function because we are not going to need it anymore. Also let's modify our condition from taskform.valid to this.taskform.valid because now we are referring to our newly created form. Do the same for the reset. And finally, we need to get the right value from the task form and populate our name property. We need to do taskform.value.task name, and that's about it. So form group is used to define the form and its controls. In this case, we have one control for the task name, and form control defines the value and validation rules for individual inputs. We also added validations. Validators.required ensures that the task name is mandatory, and validators.minimum length ensures that task name has at least 3 characters. Next, we are going to update the template file to use reactive forms syntax. Instead of using ng model, we are going to use form control name. First, let's bind our form with the form group we created, which, as we can see in the logic, it's a task form. Next, we can simply use submit and also remove the parameter from the add task method because we don't need that now. Let's remove ng model and also remove the validators since we are now using them in the logic. And what we need to do here is use form control name and bind it with our task name form control that we defined in the logic, like here. So simply provide that name in the form control name. What we need to do next is modify our error messages. We need to refer to the task form. Then use get, which receives a string, and that string will be our task name. Then we can access the task name validity like so. And do the same for touched. Now let's use the same method for the paragraphs and get the validators. And in this case, we need to access the errors and then the required validator. And we need to do the same for the second paragraph, and instead of the required, we need to provide the minimum length validator. And we can test it in the browser. We can now do ng-serve, start our development server, and go to the browser and see how this works. Let's refresh the page just in case and try to add a valid task. Working good. Now let's test the errors. Required works good. Button is not doing anything, which is good. Toggle is working. Minimum length is also working. Perfect. Everything works as expected. So what we did in this lesson is we replaced ng form with FormGroup, and we provided FormGroup with our task form. This binds the form in the template to the task form defined in the component. Form control binding, we replaced ng model new task with form control name task name. This binds the input directly to the task name control in the task form. In this lesson, we converted a template-driven form into a reactive form, and here's what we learned. How to set up reactive forms by importing reactive forms module, how to define form controls and validation in the component using FormGroup and form control, how to display validation errors and handle form submission in reactive forms. So that's it for this video. See you in the next one.